I've got Chris Walker on here with me. We are on the What the Heck is a Brand live stream. Today we have an interesting show planned out for you, hopefully. Chris is going to kind of be our guide here. We're going to talk about archetypes and what that even is and how it relates to branding and business and all sorts of stuff. So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Chris. He'll jump in and kind of tell us a little bit about his background and what he's doing. He just joined the realm of entrepreneurs and dropped his job and is going to go kind of full time into doing stuff like this. So pretty excited to have him on the show and support him in his new journey. So we'll jump in and let him kind of take over.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Rex. Like you said, I just left a rather traditional professional career path in medicine for the last 10 years to jump into the world of making my own thing. So, and as exciting and terrifying as that is, I think it's really important that we at least, oh, there's my dog. Um, that we at least have a plan and understand what we're trying to do when we jump into those realms. So, a quick background on myself. I have my undergrad degrees are in biology and English, particularly with the English. It is on transcendentalism, 1800s literature, American and British, like that, and also some of the more contemporary stuff. So, we're here to discuss archetypes. So, I'm just going to dive into that. Uh, Archetypes had their origins in psychoanalytic assessment. So Carl Jung was one of the first ones to talk about it, who was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. He was actually a student of his for a long time until they broke pathways and went down different directions. Now, of course, prior to this, most of your thought on human identity was in the realm of philosophy. So there was a quote that kind of jumped up to me as we were doing this. And that quote is, God is dead. God remains dead, and we are his killers. Must we appear ourselves as gods to appear worthy of it? And of course, that's Nietzsche. So, so as we go into this world where we get away from the religious and move to the secular and start seeing, we still have to encounter these archetypes. What is an archetype? I guess I'm way ahead of myself here. So an archetype is something that it can be very simple and universal and ambiguous, or it can be dialed in very tightly. In the realm of business, we've actually seen people kind of roll with 12 archetypes. I'm just going to roll through those real quick just to get us going. So it can kind of start pointing to and identifying certain things as archetypes so we know what to look for out there. And if you want to jump in and point out anything, like, please grab me when you do this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll just, I mean, as we talk, we'll just kind of try to take pauses and kind of relate it back to branding and marketing and kind of the applications and stuff of what we see. But as you read out these 12, I'm going to try to comment them from Restream, and hopefully that'll blast them out to all the platforms so everybody can kind of check in and see. But let's go ahead and kind of rattle off those 12. And
I'm just going to shoot through them.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the archetype, I'm going to give a character in literature or TV, and then I'm going to give a brand that identifies with that so that we can kind of make it personal and then make it brand wise. So first one that's really great to start with is the outlaw. Of course, the outlaw is really transgressive, can cross boundaries. The outlaw also reminds us that archetypes are amoral and agnostic. So you can have a positive or a negative outlaw. Like a great one to look at for a character is Rick Blaine in Casablanca. We've got a guy who is a cold-blooded murderer. He's a bootlegger. He runs all kind of illegal documents, but he is still roughly good. He's an adulterer too. Always throw that one in there. So, like, great combination of guy who crosses a lot of lines, but at the end of the movie, like, boy, he's the self-sacrificing good guy. Now, a brand that we would throw into this is Dodge, like Dodge cars and trucks. So, like, when a company offers a package called the Rebel package, you're probably dealing with a company that has the outlaw image.
Mhm.
So, so
Yeah, I
Dodge
mean,
is
even like as they take on Ford, with their T-Rex or whatever, the truck that eats the Raptor, and there's literally a picture of a T-Rex eating a Raptor on the engine. It's like, yep, they're definitely that brand.
like they are very self-aware, like they're not deluding themselves at all. Next one, like I said, I'm just gonna wrap through these, and I want
Yeah.
to come back to like 3 or 4 of them so we can deep dive into them. The next one is the magician. So the magician, of course, is somebody who seeks wisdom. It's all built on what they can make with the knowledge they've gained. And of course, Gandalf from Lord of the Rings is the quintessential. Like the dude dies of self-immolation and comes back stronger
Mhm.
with the Balrog. And a company that we see that same kind of feeling from is Pfizer. Like if you go to Pfizer, the drug company's website, first thing you see is a splash of a DNA molecule or a characterization of one, and how they're going to use that in transgenics to improve life. So, and again, like this gives us a good chance to remind us that archetypes are amoral things. Like there are people on this stream who are one side of thought of Pfizer, and there are people going to be there who are on the other side of it. And there's no right or wrong to that. It is just something that when you see it, you appreciate this thing there. Next one is the hero. Of course, like we see a lot of hero stuff in contemporary culture right now. Like Disney is making money hand over fist on this. And Tony Stark is the perfect quintessential hero. Like
Mhm.
he's a complete jerk. Again, just like Dodge, he's really self-aware of what he is. He's not trying to be what he's not.
Yeah.
So, and then a company that also does this real well is Nike, because as we went into kind of that postmodern world, we started seeing sports. So we moved away from religious and state figures being our heroes. We moved to sports and things like that. And Nike has done an incredibly good job of grabbing that community. Like if you wear Nike, you must be a winner. Like the word itself,
Yeah.
like it goes right back to victory in one of the most ancient languages that logic has ever been discussed in.
Yeah.
So, next one is the lover. Like the lover is sensual, intimate, someone we're close to. Think about Rose in Titanic. Like you start out with this woman who has no connection to the world, but she's seeking it. She's really trying very hard to reach that intimate connection with someone. And it ends up being Jack of all people. It's not the money, it's not the glitz, it's not the glam. It is the salt of the earth character. And another company that does that really well is Godiva chocolate. Like every time you see a Godiva chocolate advertisement, that brand is just making you feel like you've just been raptured away by calories and
And deliciousness.
you're okay with it. Bring on the diabetes. I'm all about it right now. The next one is the jester. The jester, of course, they are allowed to cross lines. You'll see a jester in just about every hero's journey or drama out there. Like Jim from The Office. Here's a guy, he's able to cross these lines. He's still a professional somehow. He's also the guy who gets away with absolute murder. And he gets to point out like the absurdity of everything going on around him.
Yeah.
And a brand that has done this really well, and there are some arguments to be made here, but South Park is a brand. Like South Park has gotten away with pointing out absurdity at all parties involved. Like you look at their video game, The Fractured Butthole. Like you've got some guys there who can play with language in ways like
Yeah.
they're amazing the way they do this. And even when they're almost as many seasons deep in as The Simpsons, like they're still kind of with it. They're still chopping along.
Yeah, and somehow they're able to come up with new ideas and continue to poke fun. I mean, fortunately, like the world is ever changing, and there's always new things to kind of point out and poke fun at. So I definitely think they're on point with their gesturism.
Well, and it's one of those things. If you were to pick something that a well that was never going to run dry, go with public events. Like
Yeah.
every major news corporation has gotten how much market share just by feeding public events to us every day. So, how many are we in? Halfway there. Next one is the everyman. JD from Scrubs. Like you have a doctor who's by no means the best doctor there, but he's also not the burnt out, like cynical doctor there. He's just trying to stay under the radar and not kill his patients, which, if you're not in the medical world, that seems like a simple thing to do. But your patient, they try to do their best to kill themselves.
Yeah.
um, and another a brand that does the everyman really well is Chevy. Like Chevrolet cars and trucks. Again, like we talked about Dodge. Well, go back to Chevy. You can look at a 5-year-old Chevy Malibu and be like, "Oh, hey, it's a car." But no one gets excited over a Chevy Malibu. Some people get excited over the Impalas. I don't get it. That's cool. Whatever. Moving on. Um, but yeah, the caregiver is the next one.
So let's take a pause
Oh,
real quick before we jump
sure.
into number 7. Um, so we've mentioned. I'm just going to type it out so I don't. Yeah. Okay. So we've mentioned 2 auto manufacturers, right? We've got Dodge being the outlaw, and then we've got Chevrolet being the everyman. How do those brands connect with people? I mean, are they going after 2 totally different people in their mindset, or do each of those brands resonate with the same person just in a different way?
I mean, I'm gonna bounce the question back to you. Sorry,
Yeah,
but
no, it's good.
here's the question. Like when I said archetypes can be ambiguous and don't have to focus on one thing, you can
Hmm.
pick a couple archetypes. Like absolutely, Chevy has some products that are very much the outlaw, like the Camaro. The return of the Camaro was a big one.
Hmm.
But if you're a fleet manager and you're looking to buy a car, does it appeal to you to have a brand that has more everyman cars like the
Hmm.
Chevy Safari van, or I guess that's the GMC, whatever, the Caravan, you see
Yeah.
those everywhere, like broken down on the side of the road most of the time, but you still see whereas Dodge worked really hard to try and get into that market with the Sprinter, which was just a rehash of a Mercedes product.
Hmm.
So when it comes down to that, I'd say, how do you decide? How do you pick which market you want to go towards?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, in branding, a lot of it comes down to identifying who your ideal customer is. And when you're an auto manufacturer, it's kind of like everybody, but certainly when you pick someone and the more you hone in on who you're trying to talk to, you potentially can alienate everybody else. Now, with auto manufacturers, it's probably different kind of in strategy than smaller businesses or smaller brands would be. But in general, the more like super fans you get, it means you're alienating someone else. And that's okay. I mean, everybody doesn't have to like you as a brand. And I think when you look at, truck guys, it's like people are diehard Chevy guys, diehard Dodge guys, or diehard Ford guys. And it's like somehow, and I think, when you and I were talking about archetypes early on, it's like some of that messaging that those brands send out into the world to be consumed by people, to be consumed by truck guys, are resonating with different types of people or people who kind of resonate with those different messaging. And I think that messaging kind of influences those behaviors to where they turn into super diehard fans of one of those brands. So I definitely think that understanding and knowing kind of what these archetypes are and becoming aware of them, and then you start to see them in messaging on branding all over the place, and all of a sudden you start to realize that you're identifying with different things based on some of these archetypes. So I think it's like a really cool thing to understand and know about and kind of be aware of.
And you're kind of hitting the zeitgeist of where I wanted this to go, because you are discussing what we identify with on that level. Like all of us can reach out there and pick one of these archetypes that we put forward, but what are the archetypes that we take from ourselves and project out there? What are the ones where we feed the energy to?
Hmm.
So, so yeah, and like I think we're going to circle back to that in a way that your audience is going to appreciate a bit more when we start talking about like a couple of very specific incidences of this.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and on that, I'm going to jump to number 7 here.
Yep.
Uh, the caregiver archetype, like someone who's there to take care of you, someone who's genuinely concerned about your welfare and well-being, supportive. For this, like the AI Joy or the hologram Joy in Blade Runner 2049, which if anyone in your audience hasn't seen that movie, you need to see that movie. Like, I don't care if you don't like cyberpunk. I don't care if you don't like sci-fi. You just need to see that movie because Philip K. Dick is one of the authors who just plays incredibly well with the ideas of what we know and what we don't know, which once you jump into psychoanalytic theory and the unconscious and collective unconscious personal, he's a master of it, probably why he was such a troubled individual in his real life. Um, and you want to talk about a company or a group that's trying to brand themselves as the caregivers, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Like when you
Hmm.
go to CMS's website, like right now, that's a dirty word to me because I've been living in that community and dealing with that. But when you go to their website, they do a really good job of making you feel like they're there to take care of you. Like they're the ones who are going to make sure that you have the care you need.
Hmm.
Next archetype is the ruler. So, of course, the ruler, like it's one, and this is a really good one to point out where the ambiguity of it. Like, you go ask somebody who's from England, where they still have a monarch that is not necessarily, like, not necessarily a bad thing, and it's going to be the ruler. The idea of a supreme ruler is going to be more acceptable to than to like a pseudo anarchist American where we just find that term dirty. We don't like
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah.
So, um, and a character for that, for your audience that plays video games, Mr. House in Fallout New Vegas. Uh, I picked this one because it's the only video game I really remember from back then.
Hmm.
But this character, he doesn't care what's right or wrong. He has a vision to make sure the majority of everyone is doing so well. And he puts out the idea. He puts out this image that he is there to take care of us and that everybody is taken care of so long as he's maintained.
Hmm.
Uh for a company that does the ruler very well, like I'm reading from a moleskin notebook right now that is branded with a really cringy Kylo Ren.
Uh-huh.
I bought this before the third movie, and yeah, but it's a company that you go up to their stand in Barnes and Noble, and they've got planners in every primary color you could possibly want. They have branded material, they have lined and unlined, they have dot lined and all this other stuff. They present to you a way to your life. Like it
Yeah.
very much, you purchase this and everything will be okay.
I
Buy
mean, they've done a good
moleskin.
job because you use one and I use one right there. And
Okay.
like, there's 100 other notebooks that you could have, and yet you and I are both sitting here choosing Molly Skinny or Moleskin or however you pronounce it.
Mm.
I mean, I've got them everywhere. Like they're all over my office. And they're more expensive than everything, you know? So like that's a perfect example of like how becoming like a real brand and like how your branding can influence behavior to where I'm spending triple the amount of money on a notebook than I could with another one that's probably of equal quality.
That's the thing, it's like when you hear people like Ernest Hemingway wrote on a moleskin, that could be apocryphal. I don't know if that's true at all, but it doesn't stop me from liking it better. So
Yeah.
they've established that brand, and this is where someone like me is very interested in what you have to say when it comes to branding like that. I didn't know why I liked moleskin so much, but I know that like you, I've got probably 2 dozen of those notebooks around. Like when I was in organic chemistry, I was the one idiot who's like damn those student loans. My lab notebook's going to be a moleskin,
Yeah.
I may be crying while we try to do distillations, but I'm going to look good crying into this notebook.
Yep.
So, and then moving on, next one, I'm trying to drive like, so creator, like the creator archetype is another big one
Mhm.
that is very near and dear to both you and I. Like it's one of those things where we have a vision, we want to put that vision out there. The question is, how do we make that vision what we really want it to be?
Mhm.
How do we make it good enough? And somebody who's really good at this is Leonardo da Vinci. Like, you want to talk about the creator archetype? He's an inventor, he's a philosopher, he is a practitioner, he's a painter, he's an artist. He does all these things really well. And
Mhm.
if you throw a picture of him up there, even though he's long since dead and totally unaware of it, it's it brings about a very distinct feeling, like the Vitruvian Man. There's a reason it got plastered on Voyager to go outside of our solar system.
Mhm.
Now, a company that does this really well is, of course, Adobe. Like, we all use Adobe for something or another, and Adobe has a almost monopoly on the creative things out there, Lightroom, Photoshop.
Yeah, it's really hard to break out of that Adobe Creative Suite, right?
It really is.
I mean,
And you
literally
pay.
5 minutes before we went live, I was in the Adobe Suite making that little "what the heck is a brand" overlay, you know? It's like every day of my life, I'm in Adobe all day long.
And it's kind of one of those things where, and this is where I have a question for you. Do you think it's because it's such a superior product, or because they've built a brand?
It's hard to say. I definitely think their products are good, like, and there are probably other tools that are just as good or good in different ways. But the way that Adobe has so many products and they're blended in together into this ecosystem where Photoshop and Illustrator work together and they link and they update, and Premiere and After Effects, same thing. Like, you can go back and forth between the two of them and Illustrator files into Premiere, and it's just all this one ecosystem of creative tools. I mean, it's the Creative Suite, everybody, Adobe Creative Suite. Every job posting everywhere is like, you have to be well versed in the Adobe Creative Suite, and that means everything. So I definitely think that they've got a good brand. But I also think that kind of that enterprise solution of having tools for everything that a creator would want to do allows someone to buy into the subscription plan and then be able to have access to all of those tools. So, I mean, I think it's a part of it is branding, and part of it is just like having the good product or products that all kind of work together. I know a ton of people are super frustrated with like Premiere Pro, for example, and jumping ship, but then they're like, but I'm still going to have the Creative Suite because I use Photoshop and Illustrator or whatever. So,
Well, and there's also a something to be said for where the knowledge is there. Like, you get on YouTube and try to look up for some of the other creative, like Da Vinci.
mhm.
There absolutely are tutorials there, but they're not the scale and breadth of those that are using Premiere or other things like that.
Yeah,
Like,
a lot of those things really make it hard to make a conscious decision to jump ship. Say you start having Premiere Pro problems, that crashing or something or this or that or whatever. I've had my share of bumps along the road using Premiere, but it's like I would have a really hard time getting out of that because all of my old stuff is in Premiere, all my current projects are in Premiere. I've got clients that want me to use Premiere. So it's like, why would I go learn a whole entire different tool that doesn't have as much support, doesn't have as many people using it, when like I kind of have to use Premiere? So they're definitely doing something right.
and I think there's a big argument to be made there. And we kind of derailed here. I've only got a couple more, but um, there's an argument to be made there that if your brand is strong enough and you have enough adherence to it, it's foolish to go another way unless you have the keys to the knowledge yourself.
Yeah.
Um, Anyway, next archetype is the innocent. So, of course, the innocent, you know, childlike wonder, romanticism with a capital R, things like that. A good character for looking at this is Alice in Wonderland. Like, we look at Alice and she is a young character. She's somewhere where she knows nothing about the rules. She's trying to reason through them. Like, I do give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then as far as a company that does this really well, like the ASPCA. Now, if you don't hear Sarah McLaughlin in your head right now, you're a starving African orphan, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, we all know those commercials where we see the puppy dog that's been abused, and we're hearing in the heart or in the heart of an angel. I don't know, whatever that song is. Like, it's a very strong brand that has performed well there.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is the sage, the wise person, the person who has the wisdom and experience. And of course, Yoda is like, I hate using Star Wars because George Lucas just took Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces and basically was just wrote from that verbatim. Like, it's a great tool when you're trying to discuss these things, but also it's really shallow when you consider those things. But Yoda,
That could be your
he's
brand, man. Your brand could be all about how you hate Star Wars because it's just a ripoff.
well, as I sit here with my overly priced Star Wars, I am everything you should not be. But yeah, and then as far as a company that has done that really well, like Google, like when you have a question, what's the both somewhat pejorative but also immediate, like instinctive answer? Google it.
Google
Like,
it. Yep.
go Google it. Like, and you want to talk about somebody who has the keys to knowledge?
Right.
It's right there. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that Google has, I mean, aside from having tools, I mean, they're just like Adobe, they've got tools for everything. But they have become synonymous with knowledge. Knowledge comes from Google. And one of the things that I think that they do better from all of the other social media platforms and conglomerates that are huge now is they allow us access to that archival knowledge. So I spend a ton of time on LinkedIn, like doing, content and stuff for creators and content for, potential clients, helping them learn how to do what I do. And like finding old stuff on LinkedIn is impossible. Like I can't even find my old posts from like 2 weeks ago without like clicking 5 buttons and like scrolling through 3 pages of things to like find a post. There's like no archival knowledge on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter. It's all just kind of like here and now, and you get 24 hours of glory for each piece of content, and then poof, it's gone. Right. But then you look at Google and it's like anything you put onto YouTube can be like an evergreen piece of content forever. And the more you optimize it and change the title and change the thumbnail and change the description, new people will continue to see that old content. So certainly they are kind of the owner of knowledge. Definitely the other companies own a lot of data, but they're not really sharing that knowledge in a way that's, archivable and searchable and meaningful beyond that initial 24 hours when it goes online.
So yeah, that's like, there it is. Like, you're dealing with a parent company of Microsoft who they're great at getting data in and out. Like, good lord, when Sony announced that they were going to have them handle networking for PlayStation,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, good, you can do this exchange, but what do you do when it comes time to go back and find that information again? And
Yeah.
very much this age, the wise man goes back to, well, this one time in 1933. Yeah. So, and the final one before we, like, I'm gonna kick it back to you, and then we're gonna go deeper on a couple, is the explorer. And this is the one that actually kind of started this conversation between you and I,
Yeah.
because I bounced it off of one of your live streams one time. You're like, hit me up with that. And I pointed out that you and I both own a particular product that is
Mm-hmm.
very much geared to satiating the idea of pretending like you're the explorer, right?
Yeah.
Like, like we may utilize this product to do something no more, not special at all, but we feel cool doing it. So that's why, like, and for a character, Captain Picard, like Star Trek, like it's in the name, man.
Hmm.
Like he's out there and he's exploring, and unlike Kirk, whose main answer was, "I don't know, let's just shoot it with phasers and see how it turns out." Like Picard's character wants to explore and understand more.
Hmm.
And as far as a brand for this, Cool Outdoors, like the clothing brand, like there's a picture of K2 on their logo.
Hmm.
And for terrestrial exploration, you don't get much cooler than that. So
Sitting here trying to get the little U so I can type it
get
right.
get the umlaut on there, yeah.
Yeah. And
So
then, like, of course, like, there's nowhere that's gonna let me highlight. There we go. There's nowhere that's gonna let me highlight it, and there we go. Got it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, pretty much, I would imagine probably most outdoor companies probably fit into that archetype. So you think, I mean, literally, North Face's slogan is "Never stop exploring." So I mean, when you're in say you're in a category like that, um, where you literally make products that are really only geared towards people who are trying to explore the world around them, like, if we're talking archetypes, like, what can you do to stand out within a whole category of companies that all kind of have the same mission and messaging?
well, and it was one of those things because of course I was thinking about that a couple of days ago when I was considering these topics, and the North Face is so on brand with that. But then if you go into your local sporting goods store, you're going to see more of the North Face stuff sitting in that active wear area.
Hmm.
Whereas in my experience, as played out in the mountains of Colorado, is that cool stuff is built to a higher standard.
Hmm.
So not gonna go on like a tirade there. But they've also if you look at their designs are a bit more militaristic.
Hmm.
Like you look at the name of some of their products, they have like I have a hoodie called the Spy hoodie or
Hmm.
a jacket. It's called the Spy jacket.
And, like, my favorite pants that I have from them are revolver pants. You would never in a million years see North Face name something a revolver.
Right. Yeah. So, and they're appealing to another archetype in us with that hero archetype,
Hmm.
right? Like those of us who are ex-military and things like that are like, yeah, I remember when it was built by the lowest bidder, but it worked for me for a long time. So that does appeal to that idea there. So there you've got a company that has managed to cherry pick a couple of different things, the hero archetype and the explorer archetype, and bring them together
Hmm.
to make that. So why? And when I say all these things, I bet you and all of your audience, like the instant I say an archetype, you're kind of like, I name it. Like I name the explorer, and you're like, okay, that's great. And then I give you a name, and you're like, oh, I suddenly have a feeling.
Hmm.
Why did they elicit such a reaction? And that's where kind of we jump back into that psychology realm or psychoanalytical realm.
Hmm.
And Jung described it as you have your conscious, your personal unconscious, and then a collective unconscious.
Hmm.
And all of these archetypes exist in that collective unconscious. They're your instinctual things. And Joseph Campbell, the hero with a thousand faces, like there are things that are just built into the evolution and DNA of humans that we recognize each time. Well, and I ask you, like, okay, go ahead and describe an archetype to me. Your answer is going to be not yours, but the answer is going to be, well, I know one when I see one.
Yeah.
It's really hard to like sit down and bullet point all these things, but it's really easy to identify with them in the greater world around us.
Yeah, so I bet, I mean, we could even do this exercise right now. I don't even know how to generate a list of brands. Maybe I'll just Google list of cool brands or something.
Okay.
But like, I bet, okay, 15 of the coolest brands according to Gen Z and millennials. Yeah, we know most of these. Okay. Like you're saying, I bet as we kind of go through this list, like we can probably pick maybe their, and maybe this is a thing, maybe it's not, but probably like the prime archetype and maybe even like a sub archetype of each of these brands, right? So first one is YouTube on this list.
You've got the creator and the sage.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would say too. I think I mean YouTube is a Google brand, right? And I think Google's primary is Sage, right? And I don't even know if creator is that much a part of the Google brand, but I would say yeah, YouTube first and foremost is probably creator, but then absolutely Sage. Like the whole thing with YouTube is like is all about sharing knowledge. You know, most of the content that's created on YouTube is about an exchange of knowledge, and you know, certainly there's some just strictly entertainment stuff, but most of it is all about knowledge sharing, and that's kind of what that whole brand is all about.
Like, yeah, me and plenty of other students actually got through our organic chemistry because of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah.
Yeah, another, I mean, we don't have to go through this whole list, but another one that I see on here immediately that kind of stands out as interesting is Doritos. That they make chips, right? But like, what's the difference between Frito Lay and Doritos? Like, huge difference. Like, Fritos doesn't even bring up anything for me. It's just like a plain whatever potato chip, right? And I think of Doritos, and it's like, ah, Doritos, you
Well,
know.
you've
So like,
never
they've got a
seen
brand.
yeah, you've never seen Halo's Master Chief standing next to a bag of baked Lays, you
Yeah,
know? He's always got the Mountain Dew and the Doritos, you know?
yeah.
Like, they have managed to grab a hold of that, and so here they've got a bit of an archetype there. Um, oh, man, but a second one? Jester, maybe? Like, you could probably call out the Jester on that, or
Hmm.
Outlaw. It's the
Yeah,
Outlaw.
I would probably say Outlaw is probably their main one. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I really resonate with outlaw brands. I mean that's kind of in a lot of the branding that I've been working towards. I think that's kind of some of what I do is just kind of being a little bit disruptive and intentionally stand outy and kind of prick against the norms of what most people are trying to do and stuff. So that one certainly resonates with me quite a bit.
And myself as well. Like, it's hard for, and that's why you and I kind of managed to run into each other in the same circles there.
Hmm.
So, like, now that we've kind of identified all these things and nailed it down, you've been working really hard with TikTok and like short medium media, like
Hmm.
just those
Yeah.
small little things. When you've got 10 seconds to resonate with a viewer, like if you're aware of that archetype, because you don't have to build that information, right?
Hmm.
It's instinctual. They already know what they're looking at when they get into it. So if you're leveraging archetypes while you're doing that,
Hmm.
like how many TikToks are just a vista of some mountain range or valley out there?
Hmm.
You know, how many of them are like some of my favorite ones are like the TikToks where it's like blue collar hardworking guy out on the rigs or whatever, and he's sassing his manager, his safety supervisor. Like you see a guy with a hard hat and some foul word sticker on it, you know you're getting outlaw, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So by diving into that, really unpacking those things in those short format medias, like it's easier to grab someone. Like I could sit here, I could read Ulysses on TikTok in 15-second increments, and somebody would the only reason anybody would notice me is because they want to come burn my house down for it.
I mean, it's all about audience, right? Like that's gonna resonate with a bunch of people. Like they're gonna watch you because they're excited to see what little snippet they're gonna share you're gonna
Like,
share next. You know, they're if I've learned anything in life, it's anything that you can think of. There's people that are into it.
yeah, that's true. So. So, like you just and great, we just focused on you love the outlaw idea. So, like, let's look at some famous characters who are outlaws. Like, I've got John Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
Like, John Wayne is the classic outlaw. Not because, again, remember, these archetypes are amoral and agnostic. They don't care what your society thinks is right or wrong. Like, John Wayne can run around shooting people, riding a horse to death, doing all these other things, and it's still okay. He is
Mm-hmm.
transgressive, like you said. You want to kind of butt up against and be prickly to those people who are out there that they're like, oh, it's icky for some reason. I don't know why. But also your ability to be transgressive, to cross those lines are what builds a lot of the draw to the media. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
why is it icky to me? You know?
Yeah.
And some brands that have done like Q, like with the honey badger,
Yep.
like they do the outlaw so well. They do it so well. Like when you have the cojones to call some product the trash panda,
Mm-hmm.
like you're again super aware of what you're doing there. Um, Tesla is another one. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Tesla's another company that does really well with being the outlaw, but also being this really straight laced. Like Elon Musk can get on there and mean tweet, and nobody wants his head. Yeah.
Yeah. But other
So,
people do it.
other people do it. So how are you transgressive and stay on the more positively viewed side of that outlaw? And this is like a great question for you with how you built your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Like Stoke, I don't even know what that means. I don't know where that came from, but boy, you want to talk about you've got a single syllable word that's got the emphasis on that first portion of it, like Stoke.
Yeah.
Like it hits hard.
Exactly. I was actually one of the guys that was watching the live stream. I don't know if he's still, but Anks Patel, watching on LinkedIn. He and I were kind of talking about being super punchy yesterday. We had a little super impromptu live stream, and we started talking about the word niche, right? So in America, we've got niche. Probably half the people say niche, and half of us say niche. And he's from England, so he definitely is on the niche scale. I was like, one of the reasons why I say niche, like it's different than how a lot of people say it. So like it kind of like, oh, why'd that guy say that different than I do? But B, it's like a super hard and punchy word, just like, and we actually talked about the name of my company. Like I chose Stoke because it's like a hard, punchy word. And it conveys a whole lot of meaning about what I do for brands. My whole mantra is I stoke brands. I help them with their creativity to where they're interesting and people want to follow them and connect with them. And I do that through branding and content creation. So for me, it was like it just kind of like naturally made a ton of sense and I just totally ran with it. So I don't know. It's kind of
And
fun.
it's one of those things like you go through classic media and look for usage of that word, like stoke the flames of industry, stoke the flames of rebellion. You've got those other things. Then you've got
Mm-hmm.
contemporary uses where it's like, I'm stoked to see this, things like that. Once you get away from the idea that words have inherent meaning and you can tinker with that idea, like
Yeah.
it's freeing and terrifying all at the same time for like English majors. Like,
Yeah.
so you ever want to see a classroom just go silent, have a room of first year English majors and just like, okay, words mean nothing. You just pretend to agree on what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to that, the words can have like onomatopoeia effects too. Like going back to one we already discussed, Godiva.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a very metered flow to it, but it's not as harsh. Like you hear someone say Stoke, and then you hear someone say Godiva.
Godiva sounds pretty and beautiful and
Like, yeah,
pleasant, right? I don't know that like stoke, like there's no way to say stoke without kind of being harsh.
right. Yeah. So, and as you build those things, like it's something to pay attention to
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't matter what language, even if there's a language barrier, the inflection on the word can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, like we were talking about cool, which is very much a German sounding name,
Mm-hmm.
but did they choose it because there are some German people or because they wanted it to play with the American usage of cool?
Yeah, for sure. I always find it interesting in general. I think it's a bad idea to intentionally misspell words in your branding. There's kind of like a small trend right now where like companies are like cutting all the vowels out of their domain names and stuff because all of the good domain names are taken. But like in general, it's kind of a bad idea to like change up a spelling of a word in your brand because then it just makes it harder for people to find you and Google you. But I think Cool did it in a way that worked. It's different. It's so different from, cool being COOL that it just kind of stands out and people know it and recognize it. And when you say cool outdoors, I immediately type KUHL and not COOL, because they've established enough of a brand that it works for them. But definitely I could see that not working, when companies have longer names or something and then they misspell them. It just kind of doesn't work.
And it violates our ability to feel superior through contemporary grammar.
Hmm.
Like, have you ever had somebody like correct your grammar in a really haughty way, and you're just like, sit down, okay? Like,
Yeah.
if grammar was such a rigid thing, we'd still be stuck in the 1800s.
Yeah. There's a guy on LinkedIn, pretty like big influencer, that one of his kind of tips for people to like engage a whole lot of conversation is to like intentionally misspell a word like early on in your post, because you get all those people coming out like, oh, you spelled this wrong, and all of a sudden you've got 100 comments of, which on LinkedIn super boosts, the reach of your post, but it's all just people telling you that you spelled something wrong. It's pretty
Well,
funny how we're like programmed to like fix stuff all the time and like tell people that they need to be fixed.
and unfortunately, like if we could go down a huge rabbit hole. Maybe we should on another one where projection of that insecurities is what we immediately nucleate on something that possesses something, an insecurity that we have ourselves.
Hmm.
Like, it's really easy to say, yeah, well, they did it, and normalize yourself. But anyway, that's outside. That's like a super deep psychoanalytical thing about, and we'd have to actually get like probably someone, a psychologist on here to really unpack that.
Yeah.
So let's jump to another one. How about the magician? Like, the magician in popular culture. Like, if I
Hmm.
had you list off your top three magicians, like, do it now. Like, you could.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like you already mentioned Gandalf. He would stick out to me. I mean, Merlin is kind of obvious, and King Arthur lore. He's literally called Merlin the Magician, so like that one seems pretty obvious. And then beyond that, like I'm trying to think of like any other ones that kind of stand out to me. I want to say that Nikola Tesla probably falls under that category, certainly within people of his own time. Doing things that are just, I mean, even today, like we've got Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, and it seems like we accept Thomas Edison as like the knowledgeable sage, and Nikola Tesla is like this outlaw magician guy, and even in modern society, it seems like those are the two archetypes that we kind of put onto those two figures, even though they were kind of contemporaries and were working on similar things, so it's like one is the fringe outlaw magician type, and then one is like this knowledgeable, oh, he invented electricity.
Yeah. And like one of them has a cult following now. Like,
Yeah.
but the other ones, like, people just view him as the villain of a story back then.
Yeah.
Is that really the proper way to interpret that? Probably not. So, but you kind of hit a nail on the head there. Like, you're like, just were perfect timing with that, because the magician is about transmutative properties,
Hmm.
taking something and converting it into something else,
Hmm.
being able to turn it into something new. So, like, the philosopher's stone idea, taking lead and turning it to gold.
Hmm.
So like if you have a brand that you want to help convert people, like, what did I use for that one? right now, Optimum. I did Pfizer, but
Hmm.
look at your health industry people like Optimum Nutrition. Like I used to use their supplements all the time. And they were all about helping you build mass, burn fat, using things like that, like
Hmm.
transmute yourself from this to that. And that for a long time, I don't know anymore because I haven't bought a supplement in like 5 years, but they used to be like the number one when you walked
Yeah.
into GNC.
Yeah. So I mean, in brand messaging, like one of the best ways to communicate the benefits of a product or a company or a service is to show two different states, right? You have your state before the product or service and the state after, right? So for me, like that initial state that someone would have before engaging with Stoke is like their brand is stale. They look like they're in the 1990s. Nobody really cares about them. And then you go through Stoke, and all of a sudden you've got this cool contemporary brand that looks modern, looks exciting, is sharing and engaging with their customers and their audience. And those are kind of two different states. Does that kind of fall? Does that philosophy of kind of showing the A versus the B fall under that magician, or is that kind of something totally different, more along the lines of like a hero's journey?
So, you're absolutely right because the magician uses wisdom to gain power. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's how, and I swear, like, we're going to get hammered by comments on how I'm wrong about all this because there's only two conferences where you can start a fist fight in 2 words. And first one's with taxonomists who determine phylogenies for animals, and the other ones with psychoanalytical theory. Like everybody shows up friends, but leaves broken, broken and bloodied at those places.
Yeah.
So, but that person has the knowledge. They have that secret sauce that does the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they can take you from A to point B with their knowledge and power.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one of these that you wouldn't even think about it, but Miracle Grow. Like
Okay.
Miracle
Yeah.
Grow, it's right in the name. Like we're gonna take your plants that can't grow and through the magic of nitrogen, make them grow, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, they might as well. They could have called it Magic Grow,
Yeah.
right? Certainly, Miracle Grow makes more sense because that's what we know. But like, very magician-y in that messaging.
And so when you're dealing with people who use a lot of chemistry and science like that, it really helps that brand, I'm sure. Like if what's another one, Dawn dish soap.
Hmm.
Like you're going from you can even roll that into using the outlaw, you go back to innocence. Like your dishes that were filthy are now clean and sparkling new.
Uh-huh.
And then, like back when oil spills still hit the news a lot, like Dawn dish soap was the one saving animals.
I feel like that is like, yeah, that's a commercial that I feel like I see relatively often still, is like the little duck that's covered in oil, and it's like Dawn dish soap, and it like cleans off the little duck. Like, I mean, I see that like weekly still today, you
Right.
know? And it's like, yeah, maybe nobody talks about oil spills anymore, but they can definitely see that transformation that happens because of the Dawn dish soap, which is, I don't know. It's funny that that's like a message that works because like who's trying to clean a duck off with dish soap in their normal life, right? Like that's a scenario that's well beyond anything that anyone's going to experience. But yet we're able to kind of transpose that idea onto our dishes, which is what they're
Yeah.
buying Dawn dish soap for.
And you're a hero if you buy Dawn dish soap because they're doing so many great things for the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there you're going right back to another archetype. So, and I'm sure that when people sit in rooms and think all this up, like marketing people, I always joked with my friends the best sociologists are in marketing, and the
Mm-hmm.
dropouts are the ones who got sociology jobs because, like, if you know how people work, you can drive those people to certain directions.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, and before I'm going to do one more because I actually feel like this one's super important, particularly in the world we live, and that's the jester.
Mm-hmm.
Like the jester gets to cross lines and point out the absurdity of the world we live in. Like I already pointed out South Park, and like you go, this is one of the easiest archetypes to find here anywhere. Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him, Horatio. He doth bore me on his shoulders 1,000 times. Like, as Hamlet is talking about York, who is the court jester, he was the one who got away with all this. And he's also the one that's, well, we're getting into Hamlet, which always opens up a can of worms, but
Mm-hmm.
he's the one who gets Hamlet to stop thinking about the greatness of death and how he'd rather be dead than dealing with this. Makes
Mm-hmm.
him return as the king and the ruler. So so by crossing the line from life into death, Yorick is able to call out the absurdity of the childlike Hamlet and restore him to this ruler who's there to overtake the usurper.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in popular culture. Like right now, Loki from Avengers, the
Mm-hmm.
trickster archetype, like
Yeah, he's like one of the funnest characters. Like his show is pretty rad.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I thought it was fun. But yeah, I think people definitely like to connect with jester archetypes just because they're fun and they're entertaining. I was just looking for there's a LinkedIn account. I can't remember what it's called right now for some reason, but every post again, this is like a perfect lead back to what we were talking about, where like LinkedIn is not searchable. Like every single one of his posts starts with breaking in all caps, and then it's a colon, and then he like pokes fun at something funny that's happening in the marketing world, like breaking creative agency just fired client because of blah blah blah. Like everything is just like backwards poking. I mean, he's a creative agency, and he like just constantly is like poking fun at the creative agencies. And like I'm sitting here looking for it on LinkedIn and can't find it.
Well, and barring the failures of Microsoft with their attempt at social media, you know,
Yeah.
the it's really comforting because when we look at that archetype and it reinforces our questions about what we're doing. Like, here I am, somebody who's jumping into a pool that I've never been in.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, hey, this seems really cool one day. I enjoyed making some training videos. Let's do this for a living. Ha!
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's never gone poorly before. So, but also, like, there, I'm able to poke fun at myself and say, hey, there's the chance, like, I'm able to acknowledge my discomfort with this idea.
Yeah.
And also, again, the absurdity of the world. Like, if you are taking the world too seriously, if
Mm.
you're embracing that ruler archetype, you're gonna break, you're gonna snap, you're gonna have a Britney 2007 breakdown.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, and so now that we've kind of talked about some of these concepts, how do we bring them into a brand? How do you take this idea and say, okay, now with the media I'm working in, because I want to say it was Noam Chomsky that said the media is the message, like
Hmm.
TikTok is the message, or
Yeah.
maybe he just wrote about that. Again, like I said, we're gonna get slaughtered for some of the things in comments there.
Somebody's gonna have to watch it this far into the stream though to be able to come slaughter us.
Well, yeah, fair enough. So,
Yeah, so I mean, all of this is pretty new to me. I've certainly heard, know about the hero's journey and kind of incorporate that into a lot of stuff. But I think as I have become aware, just in our conversations when you first kind of brought up archetypes and then learning about it a little bit and then learning about it a ton today, I think it really starts to become interesting and apply to like brand messaging, and figuring out what your brand messaging ought to be. And it's kind of twofold on that front of like brand messaging is about like what archetype do we want to personify, and then what archetype do we want to connect with. And a lot of times those are probably going to be aligned, but maybe not necessarily. A brand could take on that jester persona, but then be trying to connect with creatives or connect with explorers or whatever. So I think there can kind of be some connections in between these archetypes. But as I kind of think about myself, I kind of feel like I align with some of these archetypes much more than other ones, right? So that probably indicate, and then I bet as I kind of look at the brands that I like and that I kind of associate with, I would imagine that those archetypes line up pretty true, to where the archetype that a brand personifies is probably well aligned with brands or with archetypes that I kind of feel like I'm a part of, and those probably really come together a lot. So, when a brand is thinking about trying to figure out who their ideal customer is, what their customers care about, what they feel, what they think, what they resonate with, I would imagine delving into these archetypes really helps a brand kind of concretely think about and realize what that messaging ought to look and feel like.
Well, and I think a good idea is that, well, maybe not a good idea. This is more of a, I'm going to pose this as a question to you. But companies are having identity crisis. Like for me, when I think of that identity crisis, like I think of Microsoft in 2012, two-
Mm-hmm.
210, like they came out with the Zune. They were trying to point all their guns at Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And Simon Sinek has a wonderful story about how he interacted with them at the time, which Simon Sinek's like, I'm a little bit of a fanboy on his. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of his media, but
Mm-hmm.
he has managed to build a brand around making the absurdity. Like, he calls out Microsoft. Meanwhile, Microsoft's going to pay him 200 grand to come talk at one of their conferences.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when they don't have this identity, when they're trying to figure out what they should be doing, do you think when you hit that crisis that going back to maybe archetypes and just like throwing a dart at the wall and grabbing an archetype and running with that archetype would be a useful tactic to regain that identity?
Yeah, I definitely think that a company like Microsoft, generally in branding and marketing, it's bad to like appeal to everyone, right? But like that's kind of Microsoft's MO. They make software literally that's for everyone. So when you are in that realm, I think it's certainly more risky or potentially more risky to really solidly identify with one single archetype. But that's me kind of thinking along the lines of like magician or outlaw or something. Like Microsoft would not be a good choice to choose outlaw as their archetype, like it just doesn't fit. But I definitely think that it would make sense for them, yeah, to kind of pick one, maybe a main one and then a sub one as kind of their messaging and kind of run everything that they're planning on doing through that filter of like, does this match our archetype? And it would kind of, that would be a helpful thing for a brand to figure out, so definitely in my kind of pre-brand asset creation process where I'm really focusing on brand messaging and branding and audience and customer, like I'm going to bring archetypes into that discussion because I think it can help launch very healthy discussions with a client to help them figure out what their archetype is, which will then help me figure out what the style and the feel needs to be of that brand going forward. So I think I have traditionally been doing a lot of those things already, just never really under the category of like archetype discussion. So I think this will help me kind of put a name to those discussions that I'm having to help a brand figure out what their voice and their messaging and their tone and their perception and all of that will all just kind of lump under archetypes. So for me, this has been super helpful, and hopefully for other people who are either building their own brands or helping other people create brands, I think archetypes is like a huge part of brand strategy that can really help clarify a brand's messaging in that early phase, but then moving forward, they can run everything through that archetype filter, making sure that it still makes sense and is on brand. I think on brand is something that we know and understand, but really what that means is, does this match that historical archetype that we've built?
So, yeah. Um, and I guess so to turn that back around, like now we've got an established company that lost its way that maybe needed to go with a couple of other things. For a starting company, like I will tell you that the biggest crisis in my life that I ever had was the day I realized that I couldn't do it all, that I had to pick one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, when I was in college, I was knocking out 22-hour credit semesters, still keeping my 3.0 and going to town. And it was great. And then when it came time to pick a grad school, I was like, oh no, nobody cares that I could do all this stuff. They want
Yeah.
somebody who's either going to be a plant pathogen researcher or somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
going to be so. So it was a huge
They want a
crisis for me.
specialist, right?
Yeah, and you were using that term niche or niche, like
Mm-hmm.
if you were to take a scientific approach to it and look at all the animals in the world, you have generalists and you have specialists. Like in niche environments, generalists perform very poorly and they make up a very small portion of the actual species count,
Mm-hmm.
so how do we find something that we succeed in? And I feel like archetype, like even just thinking about it has kind of helped me because I have no clue what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go like here's the thing. Like, I don't know if I want to write blogs about like, oh, hey, here's this new cool new product I tried out for a week
Mm-hmm.
that nobody read anymore. Or am I going to somehow throw a 30-second or a 15-second review of a product into a TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have laser focus in something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I started a creative agency, which in the world of everything, that's pretty niche, right? Like he does branding and creative content for brands. Like that's pretty niche. But like at the same time, like I do branding, creative design, graphic design, logos, all that kind of stuff, websites. I do content creation, which is still kind of design and social media and video and photo stuff and marketing. Like it's pretty wide still, So I really only added marketing into the suite because like all of my clients want a marketing component, but I've been thinking about just kind of nixing that. So it's really just branding and content and then really hone in on those two things and kind of how they go together. And that's my brand. But even that
Well,
could still be considered too wide.
so I'm gonna do a really arrogant thing right here, okay? Like prepare yourself. So you said that the outlaw is not something that would work well for Microsoft.
Hmm.
Like just wouldn't work well. Right now there are two consoles you can buy. One of them is the Xbox.
Hmm.
And the Xbox, it was like it was pointed at the outlaw. It was the outlier. It was challenging the status quo. And
Hmm.
they've done really successful with that, you know. So would it be something where like you open up like hire a marketer or something and start another agency that can do that, or are you or I guess that's my question is would you consider nixing marketing or expanding into marketing under a different archetypal approach?
Mm, yeah. I mean, honestly, like I don't really think that it's bad to kind of have those four pillars, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's just certainly like in the freelance world, like you want to be hyper focused, right? And a lot of the content that I see on LinkedIn is coming from freelancers, right? So like, yeah, being hyper focused as a freelancer is important, right? Because you want to be that one guy that's like known as video or whatever, the one guy that's known as being an SEO expert or whatever. But like, I've got two problems going against me for that. One, I'm not like hyper interested in anything enough to like want to do just one thing. So like I'm already like, nope, can't do that. And then two, like I want to have an agency full of those hyper specialists, right? So that I can still be that source, that sage that's able to be really good at all of those things. But it's because I have a whole bunch of specialists within this all encompassing like creative agency. So yeah, I think being able to offer marketing services like as a component of what I do, for the distribution of the content and the distribution of the branding makes a lot of sense. But I might pull it out of a lot of my messaging, so that I'm not like constantly trying to go in so many different directions of like what I'm talking about.
You can't boil the sea. Like you like you're like I feel like we kind of connect on that we want to do it all. Like when someone asks like what do you want to do when you grow up? It's like I want to do cool stuff. I'm like, well, what's that? Not being an
Hmm.
accountant, I can tell you that much. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it all just depends on like what glass you're looking at something through, whether Yeah, certainly I'm niche enough to know to just like I'm not just running like a business consulting agency that's like consulting about everything a business could want. That would be too wide. So I'm definitely niched down to a point, but the question is it too much or is it not enough? But right now I've got clients that are asking me to do all of those different things. And part of that makes it hard because like I'm doing a website this minute and then I'm graphic design this minute and then I'm doing a marketing campaign this minute and I'm just kind of pulled in a lot of different directions. So
Well, and it's one of those things. I definitely get it because I'm at a stage of analysis paralysis myself right now.
yeah.
Like, here you are, like senpai who knows what they're doing. Like, you've done this, and meanwhile, I'm like, I still be trying to make YouTube videos that are 15 minutes long? That I know that if I do firearms content anywhere on my page, that I'm gonna get locked out. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I've made a pretty conscious decision to steer Stoke away from firearm stuff as far as anything I'm putting out on social. But then, like, I had a referral that kind of gave me somebody. They're like, hey, if you send them projects, like, don't send firearm stuff. They're not like totally into that. And then I'm like, well, where do I send them then? Because, like, most of the projects that I've completed are all firearms related. And that's what's on my website. So it's like, I sent them like one big project that I did that wasn't firearms related, but like if they click anywhere else on my website, they're going to see Gun City. So,
well, and that's one of those things is like that's your brand. Like you and I said, we love the outlaw. Like,
hmm,
if it makes someone uncomfortable, hey, dude, that's a value add there.
yeah,
Like, oh, this
yeah,
this challenges you in some way that you don't like. Well, maybe you should think about that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've been given a lot of thought onto like how I want to incorporate firearm stuff into what I do, because I've got my Max Effective brand that I've had for years. And at one point it had almost 30,000 Instagram. What do you call them on Instagram? Subscribers, followers? I don't know. Followers. Yeah, had like 30,000 followers on Instagram. And because it's a gun channel, they've just slowly and slowly pulled followers off of my account to where now it's like it's under half of what it used to be. Like there's no way half of the followers of my channel just like randomly decided to unfollow me.
well,
So I've been
yeah.
given thought of like what to do with that. And one of the things that I've been considering is kind of splitting them apart and making Max Effective essentially the same business as Stoke, but have it be all of my firearm stuff. So same thing, it would just be branding, design, content, and marketing for firearms industry stuff. And then that's like a hyper focused niche, industry niched company that would be very successful, I think. And then have Stoke be all of my clients that aren't that. And then I would have a bucket that I could put all of my firearms content in. And then if overnight all of the social media channels say, you know what, no more firearms, it's like, whatever, that's only one portion of my business that would be gone. And then I have this other business entity that's, still the same, but it's safe and kind of safeguarded from that. So that's one thing I've been considering because I just don't know what to do with that stupid Max Effective brand because like I don't have time to run a gun shop like what the original plan with that was. So it's like, what do I do with this brand that I've created and have a whole bunch of people that follow it? So it's been kind of tricky to figure out what that plan is.
Well, yeah, and like I totally get that because that's a lot of my anxieties right now too. Is because what if this just all goes away?
Hmm.
And I guess there's a certain element of, yeah, it all goes away. So what? I get a job at McDonald's like I did. Well, I never had a job at McDonald's, but I get a job that
Yeah.
pays the bills and we get through to the next day or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah. It can be tricky. So, I mean, you've definitely got a road ahead of you, but stoked that you like chose to jump ship and do it. So
yeah.
now
So,
you just got to figure out the how.
boy, the why is there and glaring at me, but where the rubber meets the road,
Yeah.
so,
Well, you definitely have a unique perspective and some unique experience just kind of with your background that I think can be very valuable to, clients if you kind of go the client route and what you're working on. So I definitely think that you'll make it work out.
So, but anyway, like the last couple of minutes, you and I've been talking about like our personal journey here, like you've discussed the hero's journey, like the hero first rejects the call and then there's a sickness in the land, they reject the call to fix it, and then they finally go on and they get their hero's wound, Luke
Mm-hmm.
loses his hand, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Losing half your followers was a pretty brutal wound.
Yeah, it's rough,
So
man.
so like I kind of look at that, it's like, oh well, this journey is a thing,
Yeah.
I think maybe another step, like the next step to take one of these things is grab, like, and you could do this while you're on the train or on a plane. Just grab a brand, like just throw a dart at a wall and grab
Mm-hmm.
a brand and start pulling apart what the identities with that brand are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of ways, as I delve into kind of this archetype stuff and figure out how to incorporate it into what I'm doing, but then also, what I'm doing for myself, but then also what I'm doing for my clients is going to be really valuable. So hopefully everybody who watched this or is watching or will watch it later will find this equally valuable. But I think this is really insightful into branding and kind of how I mean, it's even personal branding. Everybody's going to have these archetypes that kind of fit into what they're doing, and as long as, I mean, people crave consistency and they crave knowing what they're going to get, and the more you embody one of these archetypes, the more people can predict what they're going to get from you, and the more the right people are going to resonate with what you're trying to accomplish. So I think this is pretty crazy valuable stuff.
well, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, where does the rubber meet the road once you have this knowledge?
Hmm.
And that's where people with your knowledge and your know-how is like a client. Like I walk up to you, I'm like, hey, here's what I know. I know medicine, I know literature, and I know firearms. Well, here's this pile of junk. Build a brand for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there'll be a little bit of an uphill battle of kind of figuring out how to bring those experiences together into like a product or an offering, but I don't think that it's impossible. I think you definitely have the know-how to like figure it out and come up with something that's like truly unique. I don't really know anybody that kind of has your unique skill set, so I would definitely use that to your advantage
Uh,
as you kind of try to craft what you're going to be doing.
it's yeah. It's like having someone who's never cooked a meal at all, and you just drop a bunch of like drop a fresh killed elk in front of them. Like, here's dinner. Like, oh god,
Figure it out.
all the products are there that I need for everything, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So
Well, this has been an awesome stream, man. I appreciate you, Chris, for being on, and it was fun to get to like meet you. What do we call this, in person? Is this like in person now? Is this like
I,
meeting in person?
yeah, I think this is about as in person as it gets for maybe the next year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a weird world we live in, man. But I really appreciate you being on the show today. I think everybody that watched got some mad value out of this. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that knowledge and experience in here and sharing something that's valuable and totally different from anything that I know. So I think that will be pretty cool. Um,
so yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where maybe my my value is that I can help draw ideas through a different lens for people. For
yeah, I definitely think you could do something with brand strategy because knowing all this stuff is probably pretty foreign to a lot of brand strategists. So I would imagine that you could you could kind of package this up into a brand strategy workshop or something and have that be a product that you could sell pretty quick. So
well, it's foreign because we don't pull it apart, but it's effective because it's inherent.
yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna write that down right now.
You can go back and watch it later this will save on YouTube and all the places. So there's a lot of quotes that you have said today that are probably pretty good one liner
Right?
tweets and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, as
So
you kind of get into it, I would definitely get on LinkedIn. That seems to be a pretty good treasure trove of being able to kind of share your message For me, it's been incredibly more valuable than any of the other social platforms so far, as far as just like being able to connect with customers and connect with other people who are interested in building businesses of the types that we are. So I might definitely jump on there and probably focus there more than most places. I mean, my biggest focuses right now are for LinkedIn and YouTube, and then everything else is just kind of repost onto other platforms and whatever, because Facebook and Instagram don't love me. So who cares?
And and that's something I'm struggling with because I love Instagram just because it's such immediate gratification.
Yeah.
But boy, like, and granted, I haven't put any effort into it, except for like maybe the last 2 months. Like, got 400 followers that float around that 400. You know,
Yeah.
but now that it's time to actually start trying to get this train to make hay,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've got confidence that you'll be able to do it, man. And when you have a lot of time to do it, that helps too. So,
Yeah. So, well, I'm gonna say thanks for having me on. I'll let you get on. I will talk to you later, and guess that's all I've got. Unless
yeah,
you have.
sweet, man. Nope, I think that's it. We'll say bye to everybody that's watching, and then the last thing we got to do is pose
Oh, for a thumbnail.
for a thumbnail. Yeah, so I'm gonna switch it to this view, and I'm gonna go here and kind of point at you, and you can smile or do whatever you want. Okay, that'll work. All right, we'll shut it down. Appreciate everybody for being here, and I will see you later, man.